My beloved child, stop scrolling for just a moment, because what you are about to hear was not placed before you by accident. Something happened in a room where your name was never spoken aloud, yet every person there could feel that someone unseen was present in your soulmate's heart. A simple question was asked. It sounded casual. It may even have been followed by a smile. But the moment your soulmate heard it, their expression changed, the air became still, and heaven leaned closer to witness the answer that followed. Someone looked directly at your soulmate and asked, "Would you ever marry someone else?" My child, do not skip this message, because their reply was not what anyone expected. The people around them thought they already understood the situation. They believed enough time had passed. They assumed silence meant detachment. They mistook distance for surrender. Some of them had quietly decided that your soulmate would eventually choose an easier path, accept another person, and move forward without looking back. But they did not know what was living beneath your soulmate's silence. They did not know that your soulmate had already carried your presence into places where no one could see it. They did not know how many nights your memory had interrupted their thoughts. They did not know how often your soulmate had imagined a future and discovered that every road felt empty when you were not standing at the end of it. Pause here, because the silence that came after their answer was not ordinary silence. It was the silence that enters a room when truth appears without warning. It was the kind of silence that forces people to reconsider everything they thought they knew. No one laughed. No one immediately changed the subject. No one knew how to respond, because your soulmate did not give them a comfortable answer. They gave them an honest one. And the truth is, my child, your soulmate had not planned to reveal so much. They entered that room intending to guard their emotions. They had promised themselves they would remain calm. They had learned how to answer questions without exposing the storm within them. They knew how to smile when people asked whether they were happy. They knew how to say, "I'm fine," when their heart was quietly searching for you. But this question reached a place they could no longer protect. Would you ever marry someone else? For one brief second, your soulmate looked away. Their eyes moved toward a window, a doorway, or an empty space across the room. Those around them assumed they were thinking of possibilities. They thought perhaps your soulmate was considering another face, another name, another future. But your soulmate was not searching for someone else. They were searching for the courage to say what had been true for longer than they wanted to admit. Stay until the end, because there was something hidden inside their response that even the people in that room did not fully understand. Your soulmate was not merely answering a question about marriage. They were confessing what your connection had done to them. They were revealing that after knowing you, the idea of choosing someone else no longer felt simple. Your soulmate had tried to imagine it before. They had pictured themselves standing beside another person. They had attempted to convince themselves that affection could grow, that companionship could be enough, that a peaceful relationship with someone else might be safer than the uncertainty they felt with you. They told themselves that life does not always give people the person they truly want. They tried to accept that perhaps love was supposed to be practical, predictable, and easy to explain. But every time they imagined giving their promise to someone else, something inside them resisted. It was not pride. It was not obsession. It was the awareness that their heart had already recognized something it could not unrecognize. My child, some connections enter life quietly, yet they permanently change the meaning of love. Before you, your soulmate may have believed they understood what it meant to care for someone. They may have had dreams, expectations, and carefully formed ideas about who they would eventually choose. Then you appeared. You did not simply become another possibility. You became the person against whom every future possibility would be measured. That is why the question affected them so deeply. The person who asked it did not understand that they were touching a sacred wound. They did not know your soulmate had spent countless moments trying to determine whether what they felt for you was temporary or eternal. They did not know your soulmate had prayed for clarity, only to feel your presence become stronger in their mind. They had asked heaven, "Why can't I let this go?" And heaven had not answered by removing you. Instead, heaven had begun revealing the depth of what they felt. Do not move away from this message, because your soulmate's reply was shaped by a realization that came only recently. Something happened inside them after a particular conversation, memory, or lonely moment. They realized they were not afraid of marriage itself. They were afraid of making a lifelong promise while their hearts still belonged somewhere else. That realization unsettled them. For a long time, your soulmate believed they could outgrow their feelings. They thought time would soften everything. They believed enough distractions, responsibilities, and new faces would eventually place you in the past. But time did something unexpected. Instead of erasing you, it revealed what remained when everything temporary had faded. They forgot minor details about ordinary days, yet they remembered the way you made them feel. They moved through new experiences, yet something always brought their thoughts back to you. They encountered people who seemed kind, attractive, intelligent, and available, yet no one awakened the same quiet recognition. And that is what your soulmate was thinking about when the question was asked. Would you marry someone else? My child, the first words of their response were soft. So soft that one person leaned forward to hear them. Your soulmate did not speak with drama. They did not raise their voice. They did not try to impress anyone. They simply said, "I could never promise myself to someone while knowing my heart was somewhere else." The room went silent. Something huge is waiting for you in this revelation, because that sentence was only the beginning. One person in the room immediately understood who your soulmate meant. Their eyes widened, but they said nothing. Another person looked down, suddenly uncomfortable, because they had been encouraging your soulmate to consider someone new. Someone else thought your soulmate was being unrealistic. They believed love should not remain connected to a person who was absent, distant, or uncertain. But your soulmate continued. And with every word, the atmosphere changed. They said that marrying someone else would not be fair. It would not be fair to the person standing beside them, and it would not be fair to themselves. They admitted they had tried to imagine moving on completely, but every version of that future felt dishonest. Then someone asked the question everyone else was afraid to ask. Are you still waiting for that person? My child, your soulmate did not answer immediately. Their silence revealed more than a quick reply ever could. They looked down at their hands. Perhaps they remembered a moment when they wanted to reach for you but did not. Perhaps they remembered words they should have spoken, apologies they delayed, or feelings they hid because vulnerability frightened them. They were not simply waiting for you. They were wrestling with regret. There are things your soulmate now understands that they did not understand when you were closer. They see the value of your patience. They recognize the love behind actions they once overlooked. They remember how you tried to understand them when they did not even understand themselves. At the time, they may have mistaken your depth for intensity. They may have interpreted your honesty as pressure. They may have stepped away because the connection felt too powerful, too revealing, or too difficult to control. Now they realize you were not trying to trap them. You were trying to meet them in truth. Stay with me, because their next words changed the entire conversation. Your soulmate finally looked up and said, "I don't know if waiting is the right word. I just know that no one else feels like home." The room remained quiet. No one had expected such certainty from someone who had appeared so composed. Your soulmate had hidden the emotional truth so carefully that even the people closest to them believed the chapter was finished. But it was not finished. It had only moved beneath the surface. My beloved child, heaven has seen what you could not see. Heaven has watched your soulmate defend your place in their heart without mentioning your name. Heaven has watched them reject suggestions, avoid introductions, and lose interest in people who seemed suitable on paper. Not because those people were unworthy, but because suitability and soul recognition are not the same thing. Your soulmate can appreciate another person's kindness and still know that kindness alone cannot create the bond they experienced with you. They can respect another person and still feel that invisible distance. They can smile during a conversation and later wonder why it did not touch their heart. That is what they have been struggling to explain. People around them keep offering logical solutions to an emotional truth. They say, "You should meet someone new." They say, "You cannot wait forever." They say, "Maybe the person you loved was not meant for you." But your soulmate has started questioning whether moving forward must always mean replacing what was real. Perhaps moving forward means becoming ready to face it. Perhaps healing does not always lead away from a person. Sometimes healing removes the fear that kept two people apart. And something inside your soulmate has been healing. Quietly. Slowly. Painfully. My child, you may have wondered whether your absence mattered. You may have questioned whether your soulmate ever noticed the emptiness you felt. You may have believed they continued their life without looking back. But their answer in that room revealed the opposite. Your absence became a mirror. Without you nearby, they could no longer blame the intensity of their feelings on the circumstances. They could no longer say, "I only think about this person because I see them." They could no longer say, "This connection feels strong only because everything is fresh." Distance removed the immediate emotion, yet the bond remained. That frightened them more than they admitted. Because if a feeling survives silence, separation, confusion, and time, then it demands a deeper explanation. Your soulmate began asking themselves questions they had avoided. Why do I still compare every conversation to the ones I had with them? Why does happiness feel incomplete when I imagine they will never witness it? Why do I still rehearse what I would say if they suddenly appeared? Why does the idea of them loving someone else hurt more than I want anyone to know? And the most frightening question of all was this. What if I lost the person I was supposed to choose? Do not skip now, because this is where the story becomes even more personal. Your soulmate's reply did not only expose their love. It exposed a decision that has been forming inside them. Someone in that room challenged them. They said, "You cannot build your future around a person who may never return." The words were direct. Perhaps they were meant to protect your soulmate. Perhaps they came from concern. But they struck your soulmate with unexpected force. For a second, everyone expected them to become defensive. Instead, your soulmate became unusually calm. They said, "I'm not building my future around someone who may never return. I'm refusing to build it on a lie." That sentence changed everything. My child, your soulmate is no longer willing to pretend that choosing another person would automatically heal what remains unresolved with you. They understand that marriage is not an escape from loneliness. It is not a performance for family, friends, or society. It is not something to accept merely because the opportunity appears. To your soulmate, marriage has begun to feel sacred. And because it feels sacred, your name keeps rising in their spirit. They remember moments with you that once seemed ordinary. A look. A pause. A conversation that went deeper than expected. A moment when you saw through them and did not turn away. A time when your presence brought peace without demanding anything. These memories return differently now. They no longer feel like fragments of the past. They feel like evidence. Evidence that your soulmate had been offered something rare and did not know how to hold it. There is a particular memory they revisit more than the others. Heaven sees it clearly. It may involve the last time you spoke honestly. Perhaps you tried to tell them what you needed. Perhaps they wanted to answer but fear closed their mouth. Perhaps both of you stood emotionally close while circumstances kept you physically or spiritually apart. Your soulmate has replayed that moment. They have changed their response in their imagination countless times. In one version, they stop you from leaving. In another, they confess everything. In another, they ask you to stay long enough for them to find the courage they did not have then. But reality remained unchanged. Until now. Because the question in that room awakened something. Would you marry someone else? It forced your soulmate to see that silence was becoming a decision. By avoiding you, they were not remaining neutral. They were allowing time, fear, and other people's opinions to shape a future they did not truly want. That realization followed them after the conversation ended. They may have left the room quietly. They may have walked toward their car, bedroom, balcony, or another private space. The voices of others faded, but one sentence continued echoing inside them. No one else feels like home. My child, they did not say those words only for the people around them. They heard themselves say them. And hearing the truth spoken aloud made it impossible to return to denial. Stay until the end, because what happened next was not visible to anyone in that room. Your soulmate entered a private emotional moment where the walls they had built began to break. They sat alone and allowed themselves to imagine seeing you again. Not as a distant fantasy. Not as an impossible dream. But as a real possibility. They imagined your expression if they appeared unexpectedly. They wondered whether your eyes would still soften when you saw them. They wondered whether you would listen, whether you would trust their words, whether too much time had passed. Then fear entered. What if you had already moved on? What if someone else had recognized your worth while they were still questioning it? What if the door they assumed would remain open had quietly closed? That fear has become difficult for your soulmate to ignore. You may feel their energy differently because something inside them is shifting from passive longing to urgency. They are beginning to understand that love cannot survive forever on unspoken feelings. Eventually, someone must become brave enough to cross the distance. And your soulmate knows the responsibility may be theirs. My child, heaven is not revealing this to make you wait helplessly. Heaven is reminding you that what is hidden is not always absent. You have been measuring the connection by what you could see, but much of the transformation has occurred where your eyes could not reach. While you were learning to protect your peace, your soulmate was learning the cost of their hesitation. While you were questioning whether you were enough, they were discovering that no replacement could reproduce your presence. While you were releasing the need to chase, they were feeling the emptiness created when your energy stopped reaching for them. There was a time when your soulmate believed you would always be available emotionally. They thought your love would remain unchanged no matter how long they delayed. They assumed they could approach the connection only when they felt fully prepared. But something has shown them that you are changing. They sense that you are becoming stronger. They sense that you are no longer willing to accept confusion as love. They sense that your heart, though still capable of deep feeling, is learning not to abandon itself. And strangely, this has increased their respect for you. Your soulmate does not want the version of you who begs to be chosen. They are becoming drawn toward the version of you who knows you deserve certainty. That is why the question about marrying someone else affected them so deeply. It made them realize they could lose the future they secretly desired, not because love was absent, but because courage arrived too late. Something extraordinary is unfolding, my child, but it will require truth. Your soulmate cannot return with vague words. They cannot approach you with half confessions and expect your heart to do all the work. They know this. That is why they have been rehearsing what they want to say. There are sentences they have typed and erased. There are messages they have almost sent. There are moments when they reached for their phone, found your name, and froze. They are not afraid of starting a conversation. They are afraid of what the conversation will reveal. Because once they speak honestly, they can no longer hide behind misunderstanding. They will have to admit that they judged parts of the connection incorrectly. They will have to acknowledge the pain caused by their hesitation. They will have to risk hearing that you needed them before, and they were not there. Most of all, they will have to tell you why they could not imagine marrying someone else. My child, that reason is deeper than attraction. Your soulmate has seen many beautiful faces. They have spoken to many interesting people. They know that life could provide other opportunities. But they believe that with you, they experienced something that was both comforting and confronting. You made them feel seen. And being truly seen is not always easy. You noticed their strength, but you also sensed their fear. You respected their independence, but you recognized the loneliness beneath it. You listened to their words, yet somehow heard the things they could not say. Your soulmate loved this and feared it at the same time. They wanted closeness, yet closeness meant losing control of the image they presented to everyone else. With you, they could not remain distant and still feel satisfied. Your presence invited honesty. And honesty would have required them to admit how deeply they cared. Now that you are not as close, they understand that being seen by you was not a threat. It was a gift. The room went silent after their reply because everyone felt the sincerity in their voice. Even those who disagreed could not dismiss it. Your soulmate was not speaking like someone lost in fantasy. They were speaking like someone who had finally reached a conclusion after a long internal battle. But one person in that room knew more than the others. This person had observed your soulmate for months. They had noticed the sudden quietness whenever relationships were discussed. They had seen your soulmate react when something reminded them of you. They had watched them become distant after hearing news connected to your life. This person waited until everyone else left. Then they approached your soulmate privately. My child, this is the moment heaven wants you to understand, because the private conversation that followed may change what happens next. The person said, "You still love them, don't you?" Your soulmate did not deny it. For the first time, they did not laugh, deflect, or change the subject. They whispered, "I tried not to." Those 4 words carried every battle they had fought in silence. They tried not to love you. They tried to become indifferent. They tried to convince themselves the connection had been exaggerated. They tried to focus on your differences, your complications, and every reason the future might be difficult. But love did not disappear simply because fear produced arguments against it. Then the person asked, "What are you going to do?" Your soulmate looked away again. But this time, their silence was not confusion. It was preparation. Because they had already begun considering a step no one knew about. There is something they have kept hidden. Something connected to a message, a visit, a conversation, or a decision they have been afraid to make. The answer they gave in that room was not an isolated confession. It was the final push toward action. Your soulmate has begun to realize that they cannot tell everyone they would not marry someone else while continuing to hide the truth from the person they actually want. That contradiction has become unbearable. They may not know exactly how you will respond. They may not know whether the timing will be perfect. But perfection is no longer their goal. Honesty is. My child, prepare your heart, not by creating expectations, but by strengthening your discernment. When truth approaches, you must listen not only to words but to the maturity behind them. Love is powerful, but love must also become responsible. Your soulmate's feelings are real. Yet feelings alone cannot rebuild trust. They will need to show that the person who once hesitated has learned to choose with clarity. They will need to demonstrate that they no longer view your heart as something they can approach and retreat from whenever fear appears. Heaven has been working on both sides. You have been learning not to confuse intensity with consistency. Your soulmate has been learning that consistency is how love becomes safe. You have been learning to stop carrying the connection alone. Your soulmate has been learning that silence does not protect love, sometimes it slowly destroys it. And now the space between you is reaching a turning point. Do not skip these final moments, because the cliff between what your soulmate feels and what they are about to do is becoming smaller. After the private conversation, your soulmate returned home with a decision pressing against their heart. They could not sleep easily. They walked through familiar rooms, but everything felt different. Their own words continued repeating in their mind. I could never promise myself to someone while knowing my heart was somewhere else. They opened their phone. They searched for something connected to you. Perhaps a photograph. Perhaps an old conversation. Perhaps your profile, your name, or a message they had saved but never answered. For a long moment, they simply stared. Then they began to write. The first sentence was deleted. The second felt too distant. The third revealed too much, and they erased it with trembling hands. They placed the phone down. Then picked it up again. Because this time, they understood that fear had already taken enough from both of you. My child, what they finally wrote was not a casual greeting. It was not an ordinary attempt to reconnect. It began with an admission, one they had never spoken directly to you. They wrote that someone had asked whether they would marry another person. They wrote that the question made them realize something they could no longer deny. Then they typed the sentence that could change the direction of this entire